According to the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, or SADAG, teen suicide is becoming more common every year in South Africa. They say only car accidents and homicide kill more youth between the ages of 15 and 24. In South Africa, 9% of all teen deaths are caused by suicide. That's a big number. The fastest growing age is young people under 35, specifically female suicides, which peak between 15 and 19 years of age. To unpack more on teen suicide, we talk now to Cassey, Director of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. But Cassey, thank you so much for joining us, and good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
The rate of teen suicide at 9% currently. I mean, I'm quite alarmed by that number because it's close to a tenth of teen deaths that are suicide. Is this an increase that we're seeing, and what is the reason behind these high numbers?
And that's a really good question. You know, when we see numbers, we can relate to a classroom of children or a number of teenagers. It makes it a bit more real, and especially around suicide, because often our society, the stigma makes us feel like it only happens to other people. But when we look at the stat that over 9%, that's, like you said, almost 1 in 10. What's really interesting is those stats and that research is actually many, many years ago, and it's pre-COVID. COVID had a direct impact on children's mental health and teenagers' mental health and people around the world. So the reality is that the impact today, those stats must be a lot higher. We just know from SADAG's view as well, as we're getting more and more calls from teenagers who are in crisis, who need a crisis intervention. We're having to get emergency services, medical care, as soon as possible. And unfortunately, we're also seeing a lot of reports, even just in the last couple of weeks, of a 17-year-old boy in Soweto who died by suicide, another 17-year-old boy in KZN, a 10-year-old girl. So these things that are happening are increasing. We're hearing more about them, and that's why talking about it is so important.
Yeah, I think it's so important to talk about having these conversations in our homes. They're not easy, though, and I think the challenge might be that perhaps our families simply aren't equipped to deal with a depressed teenager.
Absolutely. I think as a parent, as a teacher, as an adult who has any teens in their life, no one gives you this guidebook of what to say, what not to say. We're very scared about having this heavy conversation around something like teen depression or even suicide. And it's a hard conversation to have because we don't have the skills. And also, we could be really nervous as to what happens if we do have the conversation and my teenager says, actually, yes, I have been having thoughts like that and I'm really scared. We don't always know what to do. So we try to avoid it as much as possible. And that's why SADAG, we're giving the tips and tools and the resources to parents and teachers on how to have that check-in conversation. And it could be as simple saying, how are you really doing? Or I've noticed that you're not quite yourself at the moment. What's happening? What's bothering you? You know, a lot of teens who reach out to our call center often say that they feel like their parents don't understand their problems, or they're going to burden their parents if they have to share what they're struggling with. And they often feel like they have no one to turn to. And that's why starting the conversation, equipping adults on what to do and what to say can really go a long way in teenagers being identified at risk for suicide, and we can get them help before it's too late.
Yeah. So the studies that are currently out also indicate that more females attempt their lives more than men. Why is this?
So what we know is that men use more aggressive methods of suicide. They're also stronger. They might have access to weapons. We find that with girls and females that they're attempting suicide more often because they're using things like poisons and pills, where perhaps there's a bigger window period to get them help. So that's what we're seeing from the research. The concerning thing for us is that we're getting more and more younger reports of children as young as 10 or 9 who are attempting or who have even taken their own lives. So it is very concerning that we're seeing the age even becoming less and less, or younger and younger.
Yeah, I mean, what is it that parents need to be on the lookout for? What are the signs that my teenager is struggling, and then what do we do?
And that's such an important thing, is that the more the red flags that we can identify and we know what to look out for, the more we can actually intervene and get them help. So the most obvious, but can also be missed, is someone talking about suicide or death or not wanting to be around anymore, or saying things like, I wish this could all just end. And they could be posting this on social media. They could be posting goodbye messages. They could be drawing or listening to music around death. All of these red flags are a big marker that maybe something severe is happening.
Yeah.
We also know that undiagnosed and untreated depression is the leading cause for suicide. So if you as a parent identify any symptoms around depression, that could be longer than 2 weeks. So a drastic change in eating or sleeping habits, withdrawing totally from family and friends. And I know teenagers don't like to be around their parents on a good day, but if they're withdrawing from family and friends all the time and just wanting to be alone, that could also be a red flag. Giving away prized possessions, writing goodbye notes, and just a drastic change in their mood. I think those are sometimes the key signs that you can look out for. And don't wait until you see all these different signs or symptoms. Even if you see one, ask, what's happening, what's going on, and encourage them to get help.
I think that what we have in South Africa certainly is a challenge where some people, and so many of us, simply cannot afford to, provide even psychological treatment to our children. So we need to talk a little bit about what that means. I mean, when you've got people that simply are in the township or in the rural areas and they don't have the resources, what options are available to them?
Absolutely. And this is, something that we deal with as SADAG on a daily basis. The first and foremost, the best free resource that anyone has around the country is that when you're overwhelmed as to what to do and where to go, you can pick up the phone to SADAG 24 hours a day for free, and you can get free counseling. But we also have resources in our referral guide for resources around the country, whether it be free or state. If you need to know which hospital to go to, how to access help at that hospital, where to go, which clinic has a psychiatrist, which NGO in your community does provide counseling, SADAG has those resources. I think as any parent, you can also speak to a counselor at the school or a social worker. You've got your local primary healthcare clinic. All hospitals also are able to deal with mental health issues as well. So if you have a teen in crisis, and they have tried to hurt themselves, definitely get them to a state hospital.
Yeah.
But again, if you're not sure where to begin or what to do, you can reach out to SADAG.
Okay, give us a number, and I'm keen to hear from you, Cassey, as well, if the number that you're about to give us as well gets some traffic. So are you getting people actually making those calls and reaching out for help?
We really are on a daily basis. Kind of pre-COVID, we were looking at 600 calls per day. And then throughout COVID, our calls have just increased. More and more people are reaching out. So currently, we're receiving over 3,000 calls per day.
Sure.
And a lot of them, 1 in 4 calls are suicide related. We're getting children as young as 8, 9, or 10 who are reaching out, and people who are 80s and their 90s reaching out for help. So people are reaching out for help, which is good. And I think for anyone who's feeling overwhelmed, or maybe someone who has any signs or symptoms of depression, or maybe you're worried about them, you can phone SADAG, available 7 days a week, 24 hours a day on 0800 567 567. I'll say it again, 0800 567 567. And you can go to our website where we have lots of resources for schools, for teachers, for parents, and for anyone who feels suicidal or down, and they can find that at www.sadag.org.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this chat, Cassey. We really do appreciate it. Cassey Chambers is the director of the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. And of course, if you are struggling, reach out to them. That number again, 0800 567 567.